I didn't think much would change that afternoon. At least, that's what I told myself when I knocked on Liam's door. It was just a massage. He'd offered a dozen times before, usually after I complained about my stiff shoulders from spending too many hours hunched over my laptop. But something about today felt different. Maybe it was the late autumn light spilling down the street, warm and gold, turning the edges of everything softer. Or maybe it was the way my heart had been doing this quiet, stubborn drumbeat every time I thought of him lately. Liam and I had been friends for nearly 6 years. The kind of friendship built on shared playlists, half-finished coffees, and sending each other ridiculous late-night texts that made sense only to us. He was the person I called when my car wouldn't start, or when I needed someone to sit in comfortable silence with. Safe, steady. That was Liam. And yet, there were moments. Small ones easy to dismiss if I wanted to. The way he sometimes held my gaze a little too long when he laughed. How he'd casually rest his hand on my back when guiding me through a crowd, fingers lingering just enough to leave my skin aware of the absence when he let go. I'd always told myself I was imagining it. Friends do those things, right? His apartment smelled faintly of cedar and something citrusy when he opened the door, barefoot and in a worn gray t-shirt that clung to his shoulders in a way I tried not to notice. "You look tense," he said, smirking in that way he did when he knew exactly what he was doing. "Maybe because you make me walk here instead of picking me up," I teased, stepping inside. The place was the same as always, soft lighting, a record spinning low in the corner, the couch draped with that blanket he'd bought during our road trip last year. My eyes lingered on it for a second longer than necessary. That trip had been the first time I'd caught myself watching him when he wasn't looking. "Go lie down," Liam said, nodding toward the folded massage table in the corner. "I'll set up." I hesitated, not because I minded the idea but because a part of me knew there was a thin line between comfort and something more, and maybe we were already towing it. Still, I toed off my shoes, rolling my shoulders as I moved to the table. Maybe it was just a massage. Or maybe, today, something was about to shift in a way I wouldn't be able to ignore anymore. Liam and I met the way most unremarkable stories start, through a mutual friend at a crowded party where the music was too loud and the lighting made everyone look like they hadn't slept in a week. He'd been leaning against the kitchen counter, sipping from a bottle of ginger beer, and I remember thinking he looked oddly calm, like noise and chaos didn't bother him. Somehow, we ended up in a corner talking about our mutual hatred for pineapple on pizza. It was an easy kind of conversation, like we'd been circling each other in the same city for years, just waiting to bump into one another. Since then, we'd collected a string of shared memories, some mundane, some ridiculous. The time he showed up at my apartment at midnight because I'd texted him, "Everything feels heavy," and all he said was, "Grab your shoes," before driving us to the beach to watch the sunrise. The day I almost set my kitchen on fire trying to make caramel, and he laughed so hard he had to sit on the floor. We were good at that, finding each other in the small moments. "Remember that camping trip where it rained all night and your tent collapsed?" Liam asked now, unfolding the massage table with a grin. "That was your tent?" I shot back. "Yeah, but you were in it. Which means you're just as much to blame. I'm still convinced you took mine down on purpose so I'd have to share yours." He smirked, eyes glinting. "Maybe I did." I tried to laugh it off but my chest felt warm. The truth was, that night had been the first time I realized how aware I was of him. We'd been lying shoulder to shoulder in the cramped tent, the sound of rain hitting nylon, his arm brushing mine every time he shifted. I'd stared at the ceiling, trying to ignore the way every inch of my body seemed to notice his nearness. Today felt like that again in a different way. "All right, you're going to have to trust me," Liam said now, pulling out a small bottle of massage oil and placing it on the table. "And lose the hoodie. You can keep your shirt on if you want, but it's better without." I arched an eyebrow. "Wow, bossy." "Professional," he corrected, though the smirk didn't leave his face. I pulled the hoodie over my head, suddenly aware of the air against my skin, of his gaze lingering for just a moment before he turned to adjust the table height. Outside, rain began tapping softly against the window, unseasonal for autumn but steady, like a quiet drumbeat. I'd always loved rain. It made the world feel smaller, more intimate, like the universe was folding in around you. "You remember when we got caught in that storm last spring?" I asked, lying down on the table. "Of course. You were shivering so hard I thought you'd turn into ice. And you gave me your jacket. You were dripping wet. I didn't want you to die of hypothermia." I smiled against the cushion. "Sure. Totally selfless. Nothing to do with the fact that you were wearing a t-shirt that got absolutely soaked and showed off my arms?" He cut in, his voice warm with amusement. I groaned. "God, you're impossible." The rain outside thickened, pattering in time with my pulse. Liam's hands, warm even before he touched me, hovered just above my shoulders. It was the smallest thing, that hesitation, but I felt it, like he was deciding something in that moment. "You ready?" he asked. I wasn't sure if he meant the massage or something else entirely. The first press of Liam's hands against my shoulders sent a slow ripple down my spine. He didn't start with anything dramatic, just the weight of his palms, steady and grounding, like he was telling every knot in my muscles it was safe to let go. "You're more tense than I thought," he murmured, voice low. "You thought wrong," I mumbled into the face cradle. He chuckled, and the sound vibrated through me in a way it shouldn't have. His thumbs began working into the muscles at the base of my neck, finding spots I didn't even know hurt until he touched them. I told myself to focus on the rain, on the muted jazz spinning from his record player, but every shift of his fingers made it harder to think about anything else. Halfway through, the lights flickered. What? Twice. Then, with a sigh from the walls, the apartment went dark. "Oh great," Liam muttered. "That's the storm for you. Power lines in this part of town are ancient." I turned my head slightly, catching the faint outline of him against the dim light spilling through the rain-streaked windows. "Do you have candles or something?" He shrugged. "Yeah, but it's getting colder already. Heating's electric." That's when I noticed it, the temperature dipping, the damp air seeping in with the storm. Liam disappeared into the kitchen, returning with a few thick blankets and a handful of mismatched candles. He set them on the coffee table, the warm flicker softening every shadow in the room. "You're shivering," he said. "I'm fine." "You're stubborn," he corrected, tossing a blanket over my shoulders. His fingers brushed the back of my neck as he adjusted it, sending a jolt through me. The massage table wasn't exactly practical now, the chill was settling in and he knew it. "All right," Liam said, voice deliberately casual. "New plan?" "Cut. Blankets. I can finish the massage there, less freezing that way." I hesitated but followed him to the couch. We sat close enough that our knees brushed, the warmth of his body seeping through the blanket we now shared. He poured oil into his hands again, rubbing them together to warm it before returning to my shoulders. The closeness was different here, less clinical, more something else. His thigh against mine, his breath occasionally fanning over my ear when he leaned in to reach a knot. My heart was making itself known, loud in the quiet room. "You're quiet," he said after a moment. "Thinking. Dangerous." I huffed a laugh, but my mind was miles away from anything safe. Every instinct told me to lean into him, to let my head rest on his shoulder, to see if the tension between us was as real as it felt. But the other part of me, the careful, cautious part, kept reminding me of what was at stake. If I read this wrong, if he didn't feel the same, I could ruin the best thing I had. His hands slid lower, working down the length of my arms. "Your pulse is fast," he said almost absent-mindedly. "That's probably the coffee," I lied. "You didn't have coffee today." His tone was light, teasing, but there was something in it that made my chest tighten. The storm outside deepened, rain hammering against the windows. The world beyond his apartment felt very far away. I glanced at the clock, but the power outage had silenced it. No time, no ticking, just the sound of us breathing in the warm cocoon of candlelight. A loud crack of thunder rattled the windows. Instinctively, I flinched, and in that moment, Liam's hand settled over mine. Not just to reassure me. He didn't pull away. His thumb traced an absent, slow arc against my skin, like a thought he hadn't decided to speak aloud yet. "You're still tense," he said softly. "Maybe you're just bad at this," I shot back, my voice weaker than I intended. He leaned closer, his breath warm against the side of my face. "Or maybe you're holding on to something you don't want to say." The words hung between us, heavier than the storm. I opened my mouth, closed it again. My heart was in my throat, pounding so hard I was sure he could feel it through the inches between us. He went back to my shoulders, slower now, like he was giving me space to decide whether to speak. But the unspoken thing, whatever it was, buzzed between us, electric and unavoidable. The candles flickered, shadows shifting over the lines of his face. And in that light, in that closeness, I saw it, the same hesitation I felt. Not just in me. In him. If we'd been anywhere else, I might have found a way to escape it. But here, wrapped in the same blanket, with nowhere to go and the storm holding us hostage, every reason I'd had to keep my feelings quiet was starting to feel smaller. The rain was relentless now, the kind that blurred the world outside into streaks of silver. The candlelight danced across Liam's face, catching the curve of his cheekbone, the faint crease that formed between his brows when he was concentrating. He was still working at the knots in my shoulders, but slower, almost lazily now. It didn't feel like a massage anymore, it felt like An excuse to keep touching me. Or maybe that was just my wishful thinking. At one point, his fingers stilled, resting lightly at the base of my neck. "You're a million miles away," he murmured. "Not really." Liar. I swallowed, the word catching somewhere in my chest. Maybe I'm just thinking about things? Things? His voice was careful, too careful. I hesitated, staring at the flicker of the nearest candle. "Do you ever worry that if you say something you can't take it back?" Liam's hand slipped away, and for a moment I thought I'd ruined it. Then I felt the couch shift as he moved, settling beside me instead of behind. "All the time," he said quietly. We were facing each other now, the blanket still draped over both of us. His knee brushed mine. I could feel the heat radiating from him even as the air around us cooled. The way he looked at me, steady, unblinking, made it almost impossible to breathe. "Like what kind of things?" he asked. I could have dodged it. Made a joke, changed the subject, blamed the storm for making me weird. But something in me was tired of pretending. 6 years of friendship, of holding this in, of wondering what if it had to crack somewhere. Like how sometimes, I started, my voice low, "I feel like I've been pretending I'm okay with just being your friend. And I don't know if saying that is going to mess everything up." Liam's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes, something I couldn't quite name yet. "You've been pretending?" "Yeah." My throat felt tight. Because if I wasn't, I'd probably be doing something stupid. Like telling you that I think about you more than I should. Or that I notice the way you look at me sometimes. Or that I broke off, shaking my head. "Forget it." He didn't look away. In fact, he leaned a little closer. "Say it, Liam. Say it." The storm filled the silence between us, the steady drum of rain against the glass. I drew in a shaky breath. "I think I might be in love with you. And I've been in love with you for a while now." There it was. Out in the open. No taking it back. For a heartbeat he didn't move, didn't speak. My pulse roared in my ears. Then his mouth curved into the smallest, most infuriating smile. "You think?" he said softly. I let out a breathy laugh, equal parts relief and panic. "Okay, fine. I am. I'm in love with you. And if you don't feel the same, I get it. Just, please don't let this ruin." I didn't finish because his hand came up to the side of my face, warm and sure, his thumb brushing just below my cheekbone. My words fell apart in the space between us. "I was starting to think I was going to have to wait another 6 years for you to say that," he said. I blinked at him. "Wait, what?" "I've been in love with you since that night at the beach," he admitted, his voice dropping lower. "The sunrise one. You were wrapped in that ugly hoodie, shivering like hell, and you still wouldn't take my jacket because you didn't want me to be cold. That was when I knew." My chest felt like it might split in two. "You could have said something. And risk scaring you off? You weren't ready then." The thunder rolled outside, but it sounded distant now. Everything felt smaller, closer. His hand was still on my face, and I realized I was leaning into it without thinking. "So, what now?" I asked. My voice came out quieter than I intended. He tilted his head, studying me. "Now, you stop pretending. And I stop holding back." I didn't know who moved first. Maybe we both did. But suddenly his forehead was resting against mine, our breaths mingling, the space between us a fragile, breakable thing. His thumb traced the edge of my jaw, slow and deliberate, like he was committing it to memory. "You sure?" he murmured. I nodded. "Yeah." When he kissed me, it wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was a slow, careful press of lips, the kind that made time feel irrelevant. His other hand slid to the back of my neck, pulling me just a little closer, and I let the blanket slip so I could curl my fingers into the fabric of his t-shirt. The kiss deepened gradually, like we were both testing how far we could go before it stopped feeling safe. Except, it never stopped feeling safe. When we finally pulled back, the candles had burned lower, casting the room in an even softer glow. His eyes searched mine, not with uncertainty but with something steadier, something that told me this wasn't a fleeting thing for him either. "I'm glad the power went out," he said with a small smile. "Why?" "Because if it hadn't, you might have left tonight thinking it was just a massage." I laughed, leaning back against the couch. "You're ridiculous." "Maybe. But I'm also right." He pulled the blanket tighter around both of us, settling in so our sides were pressed together. My head found his shoulder without asking permission, and he pressed a brief kiss into my hair like it was the most natural thing in the world. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, it finally felt like the space between us had been rewritten. For a while we didn't talk. We just sat there, tangled in the blanket, the weight of everything we just said hanging in the air between us, but lighter now. Like we'd both been carrying the same secret, and finally setting it down had made the room bigger, easier to breathe in. Liam's arm was around me, his thumb drawing slow circles against my shoulder. It was such a small thing, but it sent a warmth through me that felt brand new and entirely familiar at the same time. "You're awfully quiet for someone who just got what he wanted," he teased, breaking the silence. I tilted my head to look at him. "I'm still trying to figure out if I'm dreaming." He smirked. "I could pinch you. That's supposed to wake you up from dreams, not keep you in them." He leaned down and brushed a quick kiss against my temple. "Then I'll do it anyway." I rolled my eyes, but the truth was, every touch now felt magnified. Not because it was the first time he'd ever touched me, but because now I knew what it meant. Now there was no pretending. "So, what happens now?" I asked, half joking, half not. "Now," he said, "we finish the massage." I laughed. "You're ridiculous." "Am I?" "You're still tense. We can't start our new relationship with you all knotted up." "New relationship?" I repeated, raising an eyebrow. He shrugged like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "Unless you're planning to take it back." I didn't answer right away, just studied his face in the flicker of candlelight. He wasn't grinning now, he was looking at me the way someone looks at something they're afraid to lose. "I'm not taking it back," I said finally. "Good," he murmured and leaned in for another kiss. This one was softer, slower, like we were still learning the shape of it. When we pulled away, I tucked myself under his arm again. "We should probably talk about, what this means. For us." He made a small noise of agreement. "Well, for starters, it means I don't have to pretend I'm not jealous every time someone flirts with you." I snorted. "You? Jealous?" "You have no idea," he admitted. "It was torture watching you go on those dates last year." I blinked up at him. "You mean the ones that lasted 2 weeks, tops?" He grinned. "Yeah. You were clearly just killing time until you figured this out." I shook my head, smiling despite myself. "You're impossible. And you love it." We lapsed into a comfortable silence, the kind only possible after years of knowing someone. Except now there was a layer of more. His fingers brushed mine, and without thinking, I threaded them together. It felt natural, like maybe our hands had been waiting for this longer than we had. Eventually, the rain softened to a gentle patter, and the power still hadn't come back. I didn't mind. The candlelight felt like its own little world, separate from everything else. Liam said after a while, "I'm glad it's raining." "Why?" "Because if the weather was nice, you'd probably be halfway home by now, and I wouldn't have gotten to kiss you." I laughed, leaning into him. "You really think I'd have left that easily?" He kissed the top of my head. "No. But I'm glad you didn't make me find out." We didn't make any grand promises right then. We didn't need to. There would be time for talking about friends, family, and what might change. But sitting there, wrapped in a blanket with his arm around me, it felt like we'd already crossed the hardest bridge, saying it out loud. And now that we had, I knew there was no going back. The rain had finally eased, leaving the city streets glistening under the soft glow of street lamps. Through the window, the world looked washed clean, like it had paused just for us. Liam and I stayed wrapped in the same blanket on the couch, not moving for a while, simply listening to the quiet aftermath, the drip of water from the eaves, the faint hum of the record spinning in the corner, and our own steady breathing. "Feels different, doesn't it?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He tilted his head, eyes searching mine. "What do you mean?" "Everything. How normal it feels now." He smiled, the kind that reaches the corners of his eyes, and squeezed my hand through the blanket. "Normal is overrated," he said softly. "But this," he gestured vaguely at the two of us curled together, "this is right." I leaned my head against his shoulder, feeling the rhythm of his heartbeat sync with mine. "I used to worry," I admitted, "that telling you would ruin everything. That it would break the safe space we've always had." He shook his head, brushing a strand of damp hair from my forehead. "Safe spaces aren't meant to be static. They grow, change, they get better if you're lucky. We're lucky." The words sank in, settling around me like sunlight after a storm. I felt the tension of years of unspoken feelings ease into something soft and enduring. I looked up at him and smiled, a little shyly. "You think we can handle this? All the changes?" He laughed quietly, the sound warm against my skin. "We'll figure it out. Together." He shifted slightly, pulling me closer until I could feel the warmth of his chest against mine. Then, with a gentle tilt of his head, he pressed his lips to my temple. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, but it carried everything. Trust, affection, the unspoken promise that we were choosing each other. I smiled again, letting my fingers find his and lace them with mine. Promise me something, I said. Anything, he replied immediately. Promise that no matter what happens, we'll be honest. With each other. Always. His thumb brushed over the back of my hand. I promise. Always. A comfortable silence fell between us. We didn't need to fill it with words. The world outside could wait. Inside, the space between us was filled with the quiet certainty of a beginning, one built not on grand gestures but small, deliberate choices. The blanket that once sheltered us from the cold now felt like a cocoon for something fragile and new, our relationship. Eventually we stood, still holding hands, and Liam tossed a mischievous glance at me. Race you to the kitchen for coffee? I laughed, feeling a lightness I hadn't known I'd been missing. You're going down. Even as we moved toward the kitchen, the apartment felt different, like every corner had been touched by the warmth we'd just uncovered. Our steps were in sync, our laughter overlapping, and I realized that every inside joke, every shared glance over the years had been preparing us for this moment. At the counter, he reached for the coffee mugs and our fingers brushed again. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let my hands stay against his, a quiet affirmation that this was no longer fleeting. That whatever came next, we'd face it side by side. Pouring the coffee, Liam glanced at me, his eyes soft and certain. This is just the beginning, you know? I nodded, smiling. I know. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else. Outside, the city lights reflected on wet pavement, the storm finally behind us. Inside, we had found our own calm, a space that belonged solely to the two of us. And as we clinked our mugs together in a small, private toast, I realized something important. Love wasn't about the perfect moment. It was about choosing each other over and over and knowing that this, here and now, was exactly where we were meant to be. And somehow, I knew that no matter what the future held, we'd face it together, one small, deliberate step at a time.